Hi, everyone. Welcome to Left Undone. I'm Catherine. With Chad's murder trial coming up April 1st, we're back. April Fool's Day, it starts. Hopefully, leading to more justice for the September 2019 murders of 7-year-old JJ Vallow and 16-year-old Tylee Ryan, both found buried in Chad Daybell's backyard. And more justice for the October 2019 death of Chad's wife, 49-year-old Tammy Daybell. This is part 4 of Chad, according to Chad. If you're tuning in for the first time and don't know a lot about Chad Daybell, or a lot about who Chad Daybell is, or want to know more about Chad Daybell, I'll link parts 1, 2, and 3 down below. Okay, welcome back. So for everyone that's been here before, welcome back. Thank you so much, my loyal Loos, my subscribers, and become a loyal Lou. We are a lot of fun. We have a great community with almost no drama. So my name's Kathy. I'm a mom of 4 grown kids and a yaya. I have 2 little grandchildren. I'm a hospice nurse. I was an OB nurse for 14 years in hospice, done both ends of the spectrum in nursing, and I absolutely love what I do. Over 4 years ago, I started this YouTube channel, Left Undone Incomplete Investigations, right before the pandemic. So I was able to do a lot of content during the pandemic, let me tell you. It was one of the first channels that covered the story of 2 missing children, JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan. If you want to really deep dive, I have a podcast. It is called Afterglow Unveiling the Idaho Cult. Although I am kind of frozen in time right now due to time restraints, but I do have plans to continue it. But there's a lot of episodes, so go for it. You'll learn a lot, I promise. And if you need a break from true crime and you want a little desktop vacation, check out my Greek travel channel, Beyond the Empty Nest. It's Catherine J. Brooks, Beyond the Empty Nest. It's all things travel, especially to Greece. I love Greece and I love sharing it with other people. It's my heritage and I love the country. And it's perfect for those days when you just want to click on a video and have a mini escape. Okay, so let's get back on track and move ahead in Chad Daybell's life. I was going to say boring life, but yeah, life. Boring, whatever. Chad Daybell's life. That's what we're here for. So fast forward to the summer of 1989, the good old 80s, when Chad comes back from his mission and we see another case of Chad's I'm so special. It's all about me attitude. Chad writes that even though he was expected to stay an extra month, he wasn't going to do that. He ignores the LDS expectations, does a tour of New York City with his parents, and then heads straight back to Utah Valley because Chad does what Chad wants to do, right? Watch for this in trial. There is a long history of Chad ignoring LDS rules and traditions. It starts small and gets much, much worse, as we know. We definitely know of some examples that are so much worse in 2018 and 2019, before and after the murders. So let's skip ahead to the summer of 1989. Chad returns to Springville, Utah, and immediately starts checking out the young women in his brother Paul's 1988 yearbook. Although he says a girlfriend was the last thing on his mind. Yeah, sure, Chad. Chad's looking for a blonde woman who he's been told will be his future wife, based on some sort of supernatural visions someone in New Jersey shared with him. They saw a girl with short blonde hair praying by her bed for a husband just like Chad. Remember that detail. At age 20, Chad was told his future wife would be blonde. Tammy had one of those 80s, early 90s big perms. I had one too. That lightened her brunette hair. So in the yearbook, she looks blonde. That's how Chad singles her out. We're going to talk more about Tammy in a future episode and treat her story with all the respect it deserves. For now, let's just say in mid-July, Chad and Tammy start dating. And even though she's not the blonde that was predicted for Chad, soon they are a couple. So Chad, back in Springville, Utah now, and so full of himself, so enthusiastic about being the best missionary ever, that he's decided he'd make a great missionary training center teacher. According to his autobiography, he walks through the door and everyone at the Mission Training Center office was so impressed. Totally wanted Chad to work there. But mysterious heavenly forces are at work to prevent this. Chad applies for a part-time position for the summer and teaches a sample lesson for some people who were at the Mission Training Center office that day. He's fabulous, of course. But a week later, he follows up with a phone call only to learn his application was lost. Womp womp. Chad is an angry elf. I always like to use that, but yeah, he's an angry elf. He's an angry elf. The MTC secretary is telling him, sorry, you need to come back, reapply, and teach another sample lesson. Chad's not only offended, but he gets downright diva-ish in this passage. Not only does he have to fill out paperwork a second time, so much work, but also he has to teach another sample lesson. Keep in mind, this is someone who considers himself a great missionary, someone who loves teaching the world. But the thought of driving 10 minutes and teaching a second lesson is just too much to ask. Tammy figures out a way that he can work for the city as a summer gravedigger, where they'll have lots of time to see each other, and the rest with them is history. Sad history, as we know. Chad never bothers to consider it might have been a we weren't so sure about you, could you come back and try again? Or don't call us, we'll call you, Chad moment with the come back and try again from the Missionary Training Center. But odds are, if I was a betting woman, I'd bet they weren't too impressed after all. Of course not. Chad chalks it up to heavenly mischief. Everything was meant to find him a woman plus the gravedigger job. It's a better fit. Those are his words, Chad according to Chad. In September of 1989, Chad and Tammy returned to BYU for the fall semester. And now BYU is fun for Chad. He has a girlfriend. Yay! On campus. Chad proposes to Tammy after 10 weeks of dating. And in March of 1990, Chad Daybell and Tammy Douglas were married in the Manti, Utah Temple. It's between BYU semester 1 and 2. The following September, as part of a journalism degree, Chad begins a student internship at the BYU student paper, The Daily Universe. He's required to submit one article, less than 250 words, a week. So see if you can spot the pattern. Mayor Laud's Springville contribution, October 2, 1990. Gas more expensive in Springville, October 18th, 1990. Springville buying automated trash truck, November 9th, 1990. Snowmobile training course at Springville Parks, November 29th, 1990. Art City, Springville, focuses on outdoor sculpture, December 14th, 1990. Remember the girl who told Chad there's more to life than Utah Valley? And in January, Chad publishes his longest article yet, front page and 500 words. Funeral anxiety avoided by planning ahead, featuring Springville Cemetery. Here are some of the topics Chad covers in this article: the high cost of dying, the stress on those left behind to pay the bills, advice on buying a plot, headstone quality varying between companies, and prices, prices, prices. There's so many different weird things here. It's hard to know where to start. First, bookmark this in your mind as an example of how narrow Chad's focus on life really is, how selfish and clued out his viewpoint is as a 22-year-old. It's like Chad drives through life in a minivan with all the windows fogged up, and the world behind his little minivan doesn't matter. He can just see his own path and his immediate world. That's it. Inside his head are adolescent fantasy stories, time travel, an action hero movie fight scenes, all in the context of small town Utah Valley and his own selfish needs. And that's it. Of the 10 articles he writes in the BYU student newspaper between October of 1990 and January of 1991, 6 of them are about Springville, Utah. He's on campus with LDS students from all over the country, all over the world. What do they care about Springville's trash truck? Such deep consideration on what to write about. So this personality trait, Chad being oblivious to the reality of the rest of the world, only caring about himself, is going to be on full display this April 2024 in the prosecutor's case. Chad's defense will be to blame others, but the prosecution is going to have a field day with Chad being this selfish person who only cared about the world from his point of view, only cared about his own ideas and opinions, his needs, what he wanted. And about the last article, the one on funeral planning, in what universe would any normal college junior think his fellow 20-something students in his age group would be interested or even should be thinking about burial plots and headstones? Kind of creepy, right? He's obsessed with death, I think. If you had any doubt that Chad has an unnatural interest in death, this might be the proof that changes your mind. What 22-year-old guy is so focused on the details of funeral planning? Keep in mind, Chad's only been married to Tammy for 10 months when he writes this article. Now, maybe it was just a case of Chad's laziness. We've seen plenty of that from him, haven't we? It probably would have been easy for him to write about funeral planning because it was information he already knew from his summer grave digger job. But still, in light of what we know now about Chad Daybell, it's weird. It's bizarre. He's weird. He's a freak of nature. Again, we'll talk more about Tammy and all Chad's predictions that she was going to die young in a future episode. We'll talk about that. But remember, too, that in this time period, while he's interning at the Daily Universe, Chad actually still has his heart set on teaching. Later, he'll claim he'd known since 4th grade that he was meant to be a writer and an editor. But in 1990, he's not really showing much talent or promise as an imaginative journalist. And he's actually taking courses to get into a program that trains LDS seminary teachers. Now, that program, the program that trained seminary teachers, was highly competitive and included a student-teacher practicum. And get this, not very unpredictable, Chad was rejected as a candidate. There was another person, a BYU professor, who saw something about Chad he did not like. He did not think Chad was a good candidate for the seminary teaching program, and he said so. Chad's student teaching experience went particularly bad as far as his professor was concerned. Whose fault was that, according to Chad? I give you 3 guesses, but I bet you get it in 1 guess. Of course, Chad blamed his sponsor teacher. According to Chad, everybody else loved him. His student evaluations were all great. The professor screwed it all up. So now we have 3 examples. The bishop, who was reluctant to recommend 18-year-old Chad for his mission. The MTC office that lost his application. The BYU seminary teacher training program. There are definitely other people out there who sensed something off about Chad. I doubt anyone thought he was as dangerous as he turned out to be, though. That is the scary part. Chad continues with a journalism degree, and believe it or not, in 1991 and 1992, he somehow is persuaded to write a few articles that weren't about Springville for BYU's student paper. He graduated in April of 1992. His first child, a son, was born a month later. In Chatty Daddy style, he doesn't have a job lined up, but did manage to get a summer internship at, guess where? The Springville Herald. Perfect, right? Sadly, though, he wasn't hired permanently there. Instead, Chad became a copy editor at the Ogden Standard Examiner, a job which Leah Sotilli, in When the Moon Turns to Blood, that book, describes it this way. At the newspaper, there were new voices he had to listen to, people who weren't involved with his church, who weren't a teacher or a coach at his small town high school or a fellow missionary. They were the voices of editors who barked at him to finish writing headlines, to glue up stories to be sent to the printer by deadline. Was that shade? Leah Sotelli, well done, my friend. Highly recommend her book. Read it. A significant event happened when Chad was working at the Ogden Standard Examiner that's worth pointing out at this stage of Chad's career. In March of 1993, the paper ran a story about Betty Eady, an LDS author who had a speaking engagement in Salt Lake City. She had written a book about a profound near-death experience. These books about near-death experiences are often referred to as NDEs. Let's quickly talk about NDE books, because NDEs will come to play a huge role in the timeline of Chad's life. Some background. Interest in the afterlife, it's not new, obviously. But in 1975, a book called Life After Life by Raymond Moody was published about individual near-death experiences. Moody studied over 100 near-death experiences and determined they all had, or at least some of them had, these characteristics: an overwhelming feeling of peace and well-being, including freedom from pain. The impression of being located outside one's physical body, floating or drifting through the darkness, sometimes described as a tunnel. Becoming aware of a golden light. Encountering, perhaps communicating with a being of light. Having a rapid succession of visual images of one's past. My life flashed before my eyes. Another world of much beauty. My mom, I remember this very well, and I'll tell this story very quickly because she did not become a visionary. Quite the opposite, actually. But anyway, I should get her to interview, but we'll not do that right now because it'll become the Harriet story, and we don't need that. But let me just put this in because this story has been in my life since I was 12. My mom had a postpartum hemorrhage when she had my sister when I was 12 years old. And it was very stressful. My dad, there were three of us at that time. I was 12, my brother Jim was 10, and my brother Nick was 8. And then she had the baby. And she had a postpartum hemorrhage after she delivered. And being an OB nurse, I know exactly what that means and how scary that is. They basically bleed out and fall asleep. Well, she had one of these NDEs. This is 1976. So that book was written the year before this, which is really interesting because later she found that book and she could not believe the similarities to what she experienced. So she floated above her body. She saw everybody, nurse, doctor, everybody trying to save her. And she did say something right before she went out, like, I'm going to die or I'm dying. And the doctor said, I haven't lost one yet. You're not going anywhere. Then she left her body and she saw everything. She was here. But she said there was no such thing as time. Time was very weird. She said she saw flashes. She saw, and my sister was born on a Sunday morning. She saw my aunt and my grandmother at church lighting candles and actually saying, what are we going to do now that Harriet's gone? How are we going to help John with the kids and the baby? She saw us. She saw all these flashes. And I said to her years later, did you see the light? And she said, I didn't get that far. So it's very interesting because it's very matter of fact how she tells this story her whole life. She's 86. She can go anywhere. But she does often refer to, I've been dead. I liked it. We all got to go sometime. When I die, I'm fine. I know I'm fine because she had that experience. So that's just my personal knowledge. And my mom is not, she's no visionary, I'll tell you that. She doesn't even read anything about this kind of stuff. She did wind up reading that book, though, back then, because I think somehow she found it because she was so flabbergasted about her own experience. She was only 38 years old at that time. That's the story. Okay, so anyway, that book. According to Wikipedia, Life After Life was widely criticized for poor research practices and being non-scientific. However, it sold more than 13 million copies, was translated into a dozen foreign languages. It was an international bestseller. People like to read about near-death experiences. It also made Raymond Moody, the author, a very rich man. So back to Chad. In March of 1993, Chad Daybell is 24 years old and working for the Ogden paper. The paper publishes a story about Betty Eady and her bestseller, Embraced by the Light. It had most of the elements of a near-death experience that Raymond Moody identified. It made the New York Times bestseller list. It was a very successful book. Even as late, gosh, why did my mom write a darn book? What? We could have had such a better life. I mean, she stuck around, so should have wrote one of these books, right?
Sorry, Kathy.
In 1993, Edie was treated like a rock star when she gave a live talk in Salt Lake City. There's a traffic jam. She's 40 minutes late to her own talk because she couldn't get through. People were discussing her book all over Utah. Her book was being marketed as a great Mother's Day gift, and a grocery store was giving $5 off groceries for anyone who bought a copy. So, the point being, there's virtually no possible way that Chad didn't know about her. Ask yourself then, how could it be that a few months later, in August of 1993, when Chad had this alleged second near-death experience of his own in San Diego, the one where he gets smashed up on some rocks by a big wave, that he wouldn't tell anyone that he'd seen his ancestors and had a glimpse into the spirit world? It's just so unlikely. If you're not convinced yet, stick around, because we're going to keep bringing up examples of why Chad's near-death experiences are probably not true. Whether you believe in near-death experiences or not, one thing everyone can agree on is that NDE books can make their authors, their publishers, very, very, very rich. And we know that piece of information got lodged in Chad's head early as a way to make money. And he'll use it in 10 years' time. When he's feeling like a failure, has a chip on his shoulder, has something to prove. But for now, back to Chad at the Ogden Standard Examiner. After about 3 years, Chad starts getting frustrated with the job. And even though the voice spoke directly from the spirit world and told him he didn't need a graduate degree, he didn't need graduate school or any further training to achieve his life goals. It's been a few years, and no one at the paper has recognized his greatness. He's writing a few stories here and there, but bottom line, he's not advancing as fast as he wants to. He's still working for a small town newspaper, making low wages, and he's got bosses, deadlines, and very little freedom. So, since Tammy is pregnant again with their third child, Chad Daybell decides to quit the newspaper business and return to work grave digging full-time in Springville for the fresh air and exercise and the slower pace. So they move back to Springville. With 3 kids under the age of 4, Chad wants to be closer to free babysitting. I mean, family in Springville. They move back to Springville, and soon Tammy gets pregnant with the 4th child. Chad suddenly hears the voice. Again, this time during a blizzard, right in the middle of the back-breaking work of shoveling snow in the graveyard. The voice says, "It's time to write your books." So Chad starts writing what's now known as the Emma trilogy, because there's no greater way for a husband to help his wife with 4 children under the age of 6 than to spend every evening writing books, right? In 1998, their 4th child is born. It's a complicated birth, and Tammy almost dies. But Chad keeps writing. He urges her to have a 5th baby too, because he's had a vision they are meant to have 5 kids. His vision says so that must be true, right? So Tammy loves him, and she believes in him, though, and she still supports his writing every step of the way. She trusts that having another child will not kill her. It's almost as if Chad hears the voice, and after a little while, Tammy hears her own version of it, at least according to Chad. Let's just say right now, If you've ever had a friend married to someone like Chad, or you have been this person yourself, Tammy is so relatable. She tries so hard. She supports his dreams in every way she can. It's really sad. Think about it. Whatever his dumbass decided to do, she was right there cheering him on. Want more babies? I'll give you more babies. Want to quit your job? I'll support it. Want to write books? Sure. I'm behind you. So between 1998 and 2000, Chad publishes the Emma trilogy. The last book in that series is called Escape to Zion. Now, here's another careless Chad lie. At least I think it is. So in the book, the main character, Emma, is in the future, and she reads an old newspaper about the Twin Towers being burned. So it kind of threw me for a loop when it actually happened a year later from autobiography, right? This was from that. If any of you have an original copy of this book, I have a request. Can you find anything in the early editions of this book about the Twin Towers burning? The Kindle version of Escape to Zion has nothing like it that I could find. Search terms like burning, fire, towers, New York, newspaper, nothing. No mention of the Twin Towers on the Kindle version anyway. Chad writes about the New York, Washington, D.C., Boston all being destroyed, California's big cities being wiped out by earthquakes and rioting, and the Midwest's big cities wiped out by tornadoes and civil war. If New York City is completely gone, I guess that would include the Twin Towers, but that's quite a broad brush. Can't really see how Chad's predicting that 15 American cities are wiped out suggests that he had an accurate vision of 9/11, but he claims he did. So, if you could, let me know if you have an early edition of Escape to Zion and it found his prediction of the Twin Towers burning somewhere. Chad Daybell's fifth child is born in the year 2000, and the birth is normal. Chad's prediction, was it the voice of Tammy's early death? That doesn't come true. Thankfully, Tammy continues to be healthy and strong. And for the next 3 years, the Daybells seem to have quite a sweet, normal life. Chad works at the graveyard. They travel to book signing events at the LDS bookstores, school libraries, LDS book conferences. There are lots of cute pictures of the kids in his blog during this time. In 2001, cdaybell.com first appeared on the internet. Tammy knew a lot about computers, so I'm assuming she set up the website to promote the sales of Chad's books. It's actually quite professional looking, especially for 2001. Back when we were doing AOL back then, remember? The best sellers of all of Chad's books were written between 2002 and 2003. Children's books that Tammy co-authored. A very popular series called The Tiny Talks. Somewhere in the middle of this time period, Chad quits his job again. Mostly because he dislikes working Saturdays. It interferes with all of his important book signing events. If you read One Foot in the Grave, he has a lot of other complaints about the job too. Teenagers were making out on the grounds, grieving widows stay at graves too long, and keep him from being able to lock up and leave when he wants to. You know, annoying things like that. His brother Matt, because it's all about Chad, right? His brother Matt helps him find another job with a company that recycles and sells used computer parts. It's a sales job. And according to Chad, that is something he is absolutely fantastic at. Sales. And it pays well. But then he quits that job too. Why? Why, you ask? because he's offered a job as an editor at Cedar Fort for a lot less pay. Leaving financial security behind makes sense to Chad. According to Chad, he's known since fourth grade, remember, has always meant to become a writer and an editor. Let's forget how he tried to become a teacher twice at BYU, but failed. Cedar Fort publishes a few of Chad's books, but by 2003, Chad's writing is getting weirder. He writes a book called Chasing Paradise, and Desert Books refuses to market it. 3 book reps are interviewed in a newspaper article in the Desert News about this, and they cite irreverent material, a lack of quality, and poor sales from his books, except for the ones for children that he wrote with Tammy. What was the problem with Chasing Paradise? One scene has to do with the spirit of a dead missionary violently drop kicking another bad spirit through a wall. When Chad was asked to remove it, he was incensed. He refused to be censored. So Chad, deeply offended, is quoted saying he insists Chasing Paradise is based on a real event with an LDS Young Men's president, Chad knew. Keep in mind, we're talking about a cartoonish fight scene between invisible spirits here. Spirits that only special people like Chad can see. Chad refuses to rewrite this and decides the only solution is to wait for it. Can you guess? To quit his job again. But this time, the voice is telling him he needs to start his own business, a publishing business that will allow him to write what he wants to write. And somehow he convinces Tammy to go along with the idea. So, Spring Creek Book Company is born. Tammy is the chief financial officer, and her mother, Phyllis, does the marketing. Chad will be the author in residence. By age 35, Chad's career goal has emerged to swing things so he doesn't have to work full time and can escape to his little fantasy world to write his little action stories whenever he wants. By the end of 2004, Spring Creek has done well. Not from Chad's writing, of course, but Spring Creek Book Company is good at finding and marketing other LDS authors. Now, if I had to guess, I have a feeling that Tammy and Phyllis might have had something to do with that part. Tammy and Phyllis start off with numerous reprints of older LDS publications by LDS authors other than Chad. In 2004, the Daybells found their first NDE author, near-death experience author. Chad's friend, Shirley Ballman, tells him about a woman she knows who claims to have had a near-death experience. The woman's name is Suzanne Freeman. Now, if you watch my older stuff, we cover Suzanne as well. Chad gives the woman an interrogation. Seriously, those are his words. And decides she's legit. Chad's friend helps Suzanne write Led by the Hand of Christ. It's published by Spring Creek and it sells well. Make a note, once again, Chad is in a situation where an NDE is being discussed all around him, yet he still says nothing to Suzanne Freeman or Shirley Ballman or family or friends or about his cliff jump, his San Diego experience. More circumstantial evidence that his near-death experiences, his stories of his NDE, were made up. Each incident on its own won't prove it. But here's yet another situation that you'd think Chad would have said something if his near-death experiences were real. By the end of 2005, with Tammy and Phyllis at the helm, Spring Creek Book Company was named Small Wholesaler of the Year at the LDS Bookseller Convention. But by late 2007, the Daybells aren't making ends meet. They have a mortgage, they have car payments, and Spring Creek Book Company sales have begun to decline. At book conferences, though, Chad ignores what is happening, ignores all indications that Spring Creek is going under. Instead, he chooses to believe that people buy and read more books in hard times. You know, like they did in the Great Depression of the 1930s, so he writes. So remember, the voice told Chad it was smart to quit that good 9-to-5 computer job in 2004. So it's all going to be okay, right? Sadly, the voice, like Chad, isn't that great at predictions or finances or math. Because, well, it's Chad. The couple owed over $200,000 to over 60 creditors, most of which were tied to Spring Creek Book Company. They were forced to declare bankruptcy at that time. So eventually, all their debts were erased. Family, friends, and the church helped them get back on their feet too. So we know that Tammy had a breakdown at this time, a major depression. Chad writes about this, and Tammy's sister had mentioned this in interviews. For some reason, Tammy, she blamed herself for the failure of Spring Creek Book Company. Wondering how she'd blame herself, because Chad was probably blaming her. He probably was just telling her it was all her fault. I would see that. I can see that. But right away, Tammy, she finds a job at an elementary school for a part-time job. And she is doing what she can. Chad was in less of a hurry than she was to find another full-time job. So Chad, he admits in his blog that he does feel a little bitter that that voice let him down. You know, it's the voice. The voice did it. But this is from living on the edge of heaven again. He moves quickly off that topic and focuses on how Tammy couldn't smile for months, citing this as the most challenging time in their marriage. But being that great husband that he was, he put his hands on her head. He gave her a priesthood blessing for her depression. And again, Chad sees that Tammy's life will be short because she has lots of work to do beyond the veil. It's like wishful thinking that he wants her dead. Way to go, Chad. Did you tell her that at that time, I'm wondering? Because you know, there's nothing better to say to a depressed wife than, hey, don't feel sad. You're going to die soon anyway. And leave your 5 kids and me stranded, sure. Yeah. So poor old Chad, his wife has stopped smiling and he had to find a full-time job again. But luckily, a cemetery in Spanish Fork, Utah was looking for a full-time sexton. Chad started to work at the end of January 2009. Since Spanish Fork High School was Springville High School's rival, though, Chad had some reservations about taking the job. He writes that it took some adjustment. High school was 22 years ago, and Chad was a 40-year-old bankrupt father of 5 with less than $100 in the bank. It was Spanish Fork, high school rival. Can you believe this man? Like, seriously, he is a child, an absolute child. Seriously. But Chad, he sucked it up and took one for the team. He drove that whole 8 minutes to South Spanish Fork to the evil town that beat his team at baseball 22 years ago and started digging graves again to earn enough money to support his family. Good guy. How did Chad reflect on his luck? The starting salary was actually a pleasant surprise. I would be paid more than I ever had with great insurance. With our 2 new jobs, we were indeed better off financially than we'd been in February of 2004, says Chad. Chad decides the voice was right all along.
The voice.
Okay.
The voice.
So in Chad's mind, Chad's logic in that brain of his, in February of 2004, the voice told him he'd be better off financially in 5 years. So with bankruptcy wiping out all his debts and Chad getting to keep both cars and a house plus 2 salaries, it's a win for him. In 2009 or 2010, Chad sees a movie about the end of the world called 2012. Naturally, he relates to the Woody Harrelson character, Charlie Frost, a brilliant but eccentric radio host and a conspiracy theorist who predicts with 100% accuracy in a series of natural disasters that destroy the USA. On September 18th, 2015, Chad writes in his blog, "By the way, I really enjoyed the So Bad It's Good movie 2012 that it starred Woody Harrelson as a crazy doomsday prophet. He was great in that role. I think it's awesome that in the movie he predicts Yellowstone National Park is going to turn into a gigantic volcano because I just moved to a home about 80 miles from the park. We'll see how that turns out." It includes a photo with a caption, "I'm thinking of growing my hair out like Woody Harrelson's crazy doomsday character in the movie 2012. Okay, what is it with Chad and his celebrity hairstyles? Last court appearance, he had this style. So over the next 3 years, as the Daybells become financially stable again, Chad gets back to writing more books in the evening after a day of mowing lawns and digging graves. He can write again. So fast forward to the real 2012, not the movie, the actual year, when the United States isn't wiped out by earthquakes, floods, famine, foreign invaders. There is a significant event in the world of near-death experience book publishing. In 2012, Cedar Fort publishes what will soon become the widely popular LDS cult classic, Visions of Glory. It is destined to be an LDS near-death experience phenomenon. It's a very famous NDE. Even today, there are lots of different opinions about it. Some people feel it's the best book they've ever read. Many people feel it has inspired cults and caused a lot of harm. Whatever you think, it put Cedar Fort Publishing on the map and made them a lot of money. If you recall, Chad quit his job at Cedar Fort shortly after the problems and criticism about his book, Chasing Paradise, the book that Deseret Books wouldn't market, that one. The voice told him it would be okay, and then it wasn't. So for Chad to see Visions of Glory sell 80,000 copies in the first year and become a New York Times bestseller for Cedar Fort must have been a real slap in Chad's face. Chad was defiant about being criticized. He started a rival publishing company in large part to show Cedar Fort and Deseret Books that Daybell books are great. And with his insistence that the voice was right about this, We can only assume how frustrated Chad must have been watching the sales of Visions of Glory grow and grow and grow and benefit Cedar Fort in every way. For Chad, it must have been yet another reminder of his recent failures. You'd think he might question his belief in the voice by now, but instead, it just reminded Chad to call Suzanne Freeman again, his NDE author. And guess what? Suzanne Freeman tells him that there actually were more details of her NDE than that she did leave out the first time and might be willing to share in a new book. So in January 8, 2013, The Spirit of Liberty, The Founding Fathers, Message to America, and Your Role in It was published by Spring Creek. What's new? Suzanne Freeman claims she also visited with America's founding fathers during her NDE. She meets George Washington and some other figures from early American history. Spoiler. They warn her that they don't like how things in the United States are going. Can you imagine, though? Founding fathers probably are like, what the heck is happening down there? So Chad is also writing a new series of books himself about how the United States is going to hell in a handbasket. They're remarkably similar to this. Brings us to 2013. It's about this time that Chad Daybell starts being a regular presence on the paid website Vallow. So Vallow, it emerged from a website mostly about food storage to large popular discussions from that forum on a wide range of topics, including extreme preparedness for the apocalyptic events. People shared their dreams, their visions, their prophecies there about the end of the world and their NDEs. Chad is welcomed, literally, as a celebrity. Vallow helps Chad meet a lot of people who like books about apocalyptic turmoil. And Chad begins to make new friends, online friends, women friends. He's gaining some power to influence and sway there. He's also finding people who might be persuaded to write a book or two for him to publish to increase revenue for Spring Creek Book Company. So Chad, he really starts to like Vallow. It's looking like a great way for him to find more money, power, and what was that third thing again? And that's where we're going to leave it off for now. But next time, Chad and the women of Vallow. Please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you know when we're dropping the series and other videos for you to enjoy and learn from about this crazy case. And of course, we are just here to support the victims. JJ, Tylee, Tammy, rest in peace. Stay safe, stay well. I'm Kathy Brooks. I'll see you soon.